to reveal, so much to tell, so much to learn and to share. Sometimes we pause one thread and move to another just because we want to share that one too. And over the last few weeks, we have delved into all manner of things, pursuing more than anything else Chokmah Choter, based upon what our beloved King Dode had to say 3,000 years ago about the Choter, this stem off of his branch, and how he would use intelligence to pull together the whole portrait, the whole story of father and son, of Yahowah and Dode, and reintroduce both to Yisrael. And we have done a number of programs on the criminal underpinnings of Christianity, where Paul used identity theft to rob Dode as the Messiah and the King of God, the very Son of God, and the Jewish people out of their Messiah and their inheritance. We've also done a series on the consequence of the Isaiah 17 and 18 prophecies regarding the carving out of a state of terror out of the heart of Israel, making the country indefensible, and that it being perpetrated primarily by the United States of America so that Israel would be forewarned as to what is imminent in its future. So we have done a number of programs. There's no shortage of YAHOWAH blog information, if you will, but it has been a while since we focused on Qatsyr harvest. And Qatsyr harvest is something that I presented as completely as I was capable a little over a year ago, when rewriting and expanding the 5th volume of the Yada Yahowah series, obviously entitled Qatsyr Harvest. It is about the 2 upcoming harvests, both magnificent events in the lives of God's people. The first of those, the next of those, is the harvest of standing grain on Shabuah. Shabuah means the promise of 7. It will be celebrated, of course, 7 years prior to Dode's return as our King, the Messiah, the very Son of God, with Yahowah on Kippurim in year 6000 Yah, sunset October 2nd, 2033. The next harvest following Shabuah will be Towrah. It follows, obviously, Shabuah by that prescribed 7 years. So while Shabuah will be fulfilled on the 22nd of May, a Shabat, in year 2026, the Towrah harvest, which is the final ingathering or gleaning of God's people, will transpire in 2 phases. The evening of the 23rd of September in year 2033, year 6000 Yah, will be an ingathering of olives representing both Yehudim and Yisrael. The following day will be, well, the greatest show on earth. Chariots leaving and returning to Israel from the heavens, as final remnant of Yisrael gathered for the events that will play out on this day. Yah selected as the ultimate master of ceremonies. The Adam of Parah offering his life to prepare this adulterous woman that has been Israel for betrothal to her king 10 days before her king returns, all on top of the Temple Mount of Yahowah in the city of Dode, Um, it will be just a magnificent time, more extraordinary than any moment in human history, over what will be a 10-day period between Towrah at the end of the time of Yaakov's troubles, and the evening and daytime events of Towrah, more extraordinary really than any experience in all of human history, leading to the most glorious moment and the long existence, eternal existence of our God. His return with his son on Yom Kippurim, and how 5 days later the earth will have been transformed back into the conditions experienced in the Garden of Eden, and this mortal remnant of Israel who has been spared by the Adamah Parah, this bloody red man from the earth, who is productive, this man from Edom, they will enter the garden and live 1,000 years in Yahweh's presence before forever begins. And we explore the entire universe. So this is where we are in God's story. And I wanted to resume a presentation on the harvest of Shabuah and the prelude to it at this time, because on Sunday evening, today is a Shabat. It is the Saturday. I think what today is the 31st of the month of May. June 1st will be tomorrow, June 1st in 2025, at sunset, wherever you may live, will be the beginning of the final Shabuah harvest before its fulfillment. So that is why we're returned to this message. And when we return, we come back to a statement from Yahweh that I don't think I fully understood until quite recently, when I had the great pleasure and the enormous angst of translating and commenting on one of the most impactful passages I've ever considered. It's one that we will work our way up to and through in the Chokmah Choder series. It is Numbers 11. And I'm going to introduce this passage statement from Yahweh in Hosea, based upon Numbers 11. What you read in Numbers 11 is that the children of Israel were obnoxious. And they complained about everything. They were miserable to be around. And God got so indignant with him, fire broke out surrounding the camp. This is God saying, I'm really, really disappointed in you. I'm flat out angry about you. And in the midst of all of this, Moshe literally craps out. It's a gambling term for those who have ever rolled the dice. He absolutely crashes. He has an emotional meltdown. He becomes essentially incapacitated. And the cause is Israel again. God's people were obnoxious. They were antagonistic. They were embittered. They were appalling. They were grotesque. They were nothing but constant complainers and totally irritating. Irritating to the point that Moshe said to God, not only can't I deal with these people, I can't deal with Israel. I can't stand them. What I need you to do is just to kill me now, because this is not working out and I don't want to be part of this anymore. No one is capable of dealing with these people. They're just too embittered, too irascible. They will not listen. They will not change. They are impossible. I give up. I want out of our arrangement. No more. You know, Jews religiously celebrate Moshe. They call him their own and the great liberator and the great prophet. They even want to give him the title of rabbi. And yet Moshe says, I can't stand you. I want nothing to do with you. I didn't want this job in the first place because I knew you were ungrateful and miserable to be around. And now that I had this experience with you thus far and had you do nothing but complain, I want out of here. I mean, just kill me. It's that bad. I just want done. No more. God's response was not to say, oh, come on, you're making too big a deal of this. It wasn't to say, oh, come on, they do have some redeeming qualities. Let's give them another chance. It wasn't to say, I think you've misrepresented the situation and it's not nearly that bad. Nope. It's not what God said. God said, yeah, they are jerks. They're malcontents. They're obnoxious. I can't stand them either. I want no part of them. Why do you think I picked you to communicate through? When they told me to go away and never speak to them again, why do you think I was so happy with that alternative? Fine with me. I agree. I don't want anything to do with them. So we're in agreement. They're impossible. So this point on, we're going to go through the motions. I'm not going to engage with them any longer. I will pick you, and there will be some 20 men and women from this point on that I will communicate through. Israel and I are done. I don't think there's one Jew in a million that knows that. And yet there it is right in the Torah. Bamidbar 11. Bamidbar 12, by the way, destroys the whole myth of the Talmud and of Rabbinic Judaism. I want that to sink in. Jews have been obnoxious, embittered, malcreants for 3,400 years. God gave up on you. Yes, he chose you to be his people, but you did not choose him. You've erased his name. You plastered over his Torah with your Babylonian Talmud. You've canceled the covenant relationship with your God-forsaken religion. You've done everything you could to irritate God relative to his beloved son. You don't accept Dowd as the son of God. You don't accept Dowd as the Messiah. You don't accept Dowd as the returning king. And you most certainly don't accept Dowd for what he did for you by fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim at great cost, even though he told you exactly what he was going to do, when he was going to do it, and why he was going to do it. Jews, there is no Hashem. There is no Adonai. There is no G-D. You do not know Yahuwah, and he wants nothing to do with you as you currently exist. The sole reason that I'm here, it's only one, is that God wants you to change and return to him so that he can return to you. That is the offer he is proposing. This is the last time he's going to offer it. My job is to tell you the truth about yourselves and about Yahuwah, as well as your king, my king, so that you are in a position to respond intelligently. Now, I realize that 99 out of 100 of you are going to make the wrong choice, that you're going to continue to be religious, that you're going to continue to be political, that you're going to continue to erase Yahweh's name, that you're going to continue to pretend that you're the chosen people and that your G-D gives a crap about you. So I'm here for the 1 in 100. Maybe 1 in a million, certainly 1 in 1,000 people apart from Israel, where the odds are even fewer that are going to listen. But that's why I'm here. That is why Yahweh gave me the spirit of Yahweh, the spirit of intelligence, of understanding, of conviction, of knowledge, of being able to see the entire picture, being the first person who could communicate God's story from beginning to end. The spirit of reverence and respect for Yahweh. I was given those Ruach of Yahweh as they are delineated in Isaiah 11. You go look it up. It's on the great Isaiah scroll. And I am the man from Edom who saves many. I am the Adam of Perah, who lays down his life to protect Israel. I'm doing this for you. I'm here for you. I represent Yahweh. And his message is exceedingly simple. Israel, you have been estranged from God for 3,450 years. You are as rude to God now as you were then. And as a consequence, you are about to endure the time of Jacob's troubles. It is going to start 12 months from the broadcast of this live stream. To the day, if you're listening to this on Sunday, it is to the day. And it will end 7 years later after the Shabuah harvest of covenant members with Towrah. You have 3 opportunities now to get right with God. Shabuah, Towrah, and the sacrifice of the red heifer on the concluding portion of Towrah as the sun rises on the Shabat of September 24th, 2033. My advice to you is my advice will be to respond now, because to be among the remnant, you will have to survive the time of Jacob's troubles, of which 2 out of every 3 Jews are going to die. That's how dire your situation is. And you witness it all around the world. The world has turned against Israel. I gave Israel advice inspired by Yahweh as to how to respond to the terrorist attack that I had predicted the year prior, now known as October 7th. And on October 7th, I provided Israel with a way to survive what had just happened and what was going to happen. And Israel did none of it. And it did exactly what I had foretold Israel was going to do, and it's had the consequence that I explained at that time. And you've turned the entire world against you, pursuing a winless objective. And so here we are. And how you respond to what I am saying now is going to determine whether you live or die. It is that simple. We've reached the point where there are very few tomorrows left. Now, as I had said, based upon what Yahweh clearly conveyed, Yahweh gave up on Israel 3,450 years ago. Yet he had still made a promise to Abraham, and God's consistent. When he makes a promise, he honors it. It also, in the ensuing period, has done something extraordinary with his beloved son, Dod, in the fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim, to open the doorway to life, to what you would call forgiveness. It's actually the removal of religious and political guilt, taking it into Sheol, never to be seen again on Matzah, and then being brought into God's covenant family by the firstborn of God, his Bakor on Bakurim, firstborn children. That as a result of what God did with his son Dod in year 4000 33 CE, exactly as they foretold, you have the opportunity now to return. They're offering it to you. I'm presenting it to you. And so God, through the prophet Hosea, makes a rather extraordinary series of declarations. He tells Hosea that he wants his prophet to marry a religious whore. You're familiar with the story? I've mentioned it, of the adulterous woman in Numbers 5. It's you, Israel. He told Hosea to marry a religious whore, a temple prostitute, Gomer, because he wanted his prophet to empathize, to have a sense of understanding of what Yahweh was enduring with Israel. Had nothing to do with sexuality. It had all to do with religion. Israel was and continues to be overtly religious. In the minds of many Jews, there is no distinction between being Jewish and Judaism. And from God's point of view, the ethnicity is the most important in the world, and the religion is the most disgusting. God makes a hell of a distinction. Literally life and death, or eternal life in his presence, or eternal separation in Sheol. And so the entire reason that God asked Hosea to marry a religious whore is that he would understand and be passionate about which Israel was putting Yahweh through. And so Israel, you would see yourself as that whore. Then you would relate to the story of Numbers 5 and the adulterous woman. You would recognize that woman is you. Now, there is a cure for that woman. It's the sacrifice of the red heifer. And the red heifer is not a red cow. I'm the Adamah Parah, the bloody red man who is productive. I'm also the man from Edom who saves many, also in red, blood red. Just as Dod served as the Passover lamb, he didn't go bah as the Romans crucified him on Passover. It was his corporal body that was sacrificed. His soul then carried our guilt into Sheol and then returned to Yahweh on Bakurim. It's not human sacrifice because the soul does not die, just the body. The message that God has for you at this time is shub for shub or no shub for you. That's one of the things I keep on repeating all along because, well, I rather like Jerry Seinfeld, a good Jewish comedian. And I love the line that is presented in the Soup Nazi episode. No soup for you. Well, shub for shub or no shub for you. See, Yahweh's edict. It's his demand. It is where he stands on this matter, and he's not going to change his mind. He's etched it in stone. He's repeated it over and over again. What that means, Israel, you change. Stop being religious. Stop being political. Stop relying on the IDF. Stop relying on the Mossad and the Shin Bet, and start relying on Yahweh. Proclaim his name. Come to understand who he is and what he's offering and expecting in return. Embrace what his beloved son, Dod, has done for you. Change and return to Yahweh at long last. And Yahweh will shub. He will return to you and restore you. Shub for shub or no shub for you. So, Halak Shub El Makom Ani Ad Asher Shamar Wa Bakash Bene Ani. It is the beginning of Hosea 5:5. It continues Baha Sha'ar Lahim Shakarani. I will go away. I'm walking away. And I will return. I will travel about and I will come back. Halak Shuba. At Asher Shamar. Until they closely examine and carefully consider the way to receive the benefits of the relationship through the restoring witness of the eternal testimony. And Bakash Pene Ani, they seek my presence, responsibly investigating and learning about my appearance. Reasonably clear, isn't it? God's going away, but he will return. He's going to his place, his home. That would be in Shamaim. That would mean not here on earth. And he's going to stay there until you closely examine and carefully consider the way to receive the benefits of the relationship, doing so through the testimony of the restoring witness. And until you seek Yahweh's presence, my presence, he says, responsibly investigating and learning about my appearance. It is during the time of trouble, Baha Sharar. This is the time of Jacob's trouble. Great distress, being besieged and restricted, enclosed and confined, abused. That they will approach by earnestly seeking me, longing to learn about the relationship. Hosea, he saves, 5:15. Israel, the worst, best news. You have been abused in almost every imaginable way. During the Exodus, you put yourself through it. You have no one to blame for yourself. But you were abused by the Egyptians. You were abused by the Assyrians, by the Philistines, by the Amalek, by the Babylonians, by the Macedonian Greeks, by the Imperial Romans, by the Roman Catholics, by the Ottoman Muslims, by Muhammad's Muslims, by the Roman Catholic Church, some more, by the Muslims, some more, by the Second and Third Reich of the Holy Roman Empire, and then the Nazis, then Muslims again, and now Marxists and Muslims. It's been a rough go. And through all that time, never once have you returned to Yahweh. There are some brief moments where under Dode there was some sign of unity, very, very briefly under Solomon, for a matter of months under Hezekiah, occasionally through a righteous king, but it never lasted more than a few months. For all the rest of the time, you've been estranged. And no matter how bad it was, even with Yahweh saying, because you don't recognize me, because you're not willing to accept who I am, what I'm offering, and expecting in return, because you don't celebrate my Moed Mikre as they were intended, because you don't honor the conditions of the Bereth covenant relationship, these bad things are going to happen to you, and they did. And during them, there was no return. Even during the Holocaust, you put God on trial rather than yourselves. October 7th was the most gruesome attack ever made against a people. There have been larger death tolls, but never an attack as barbaric, as inhuman, as grotesque as what Muslims did to Jews on October 7th. And still you didn't return to Yahweh. So what God is saying here is going to take trouble beyond your imagination. Sha'ar is the basis of Mitzrayim, where you were enslaved for 80 years in Egypt. They perpetrated apartheid and genocide on you. God's saying it's going to be far worse than that. In fact, the prophet Yoel says that what you're about to experience in these next 8 years, starting a year from now and lasting for 7 years, and this is the prelude to it, certainly the birth pangs of it, is going to be worse than at any time in all of history, far worse than the Holocaust. And you brought it on yourselves by being so belligerent, so unwilling to stop erasing Yahweh's name, so unwilling to accept David as your Messiah, the Son of God, the returning king, one who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakorim on your behalf. But what's coming is so egregious that you're finally going to come to the point of saying, okay, can't rely on the rabbis anymore, bad choice. Can't rely on my politicians anymore, obviously a bad choice. They're continuing to do the same things, expecting a different result, not working. You're going to not rely on American presidents who are in the midst of betraying you. Your weapons and your IDF did not protect you on October 7th, and they are not going to protect you in 2027 when Alaska Flood 2.0 is 1,000 times worse than the predecessor. When the whole world is screaming to obliterate Israel and Jews, when you have no one that is willing to stand up for you, you're finally going to turn to Yahweh. Now, I understand the situation. I am sort of like that in reverse. You gave Yahweh no option but to choose me. And now you're being given no option but to choose God. Now, I wish that things had been different. I wish that God had many options and that he decided that I was the best amongst the options that he had, but it's just not the case. I was the only option, was the only one willing to listen to him and to do what I have done these past 24 years and will do over the next 8, and then forevermore on behalf of our King and our God, in service to both of them. That's the greatest job in the world. I'm delighted to have it. I'm pleased that God thought I could handle it, that he has empowered me to do it well by his standards, actually well by his standards. But I got this job because there was no one else willing to do it. God might beg to differ with that, might say, no, I chose you 3,000 years ago when I announced that you would be doing this job in the Torah. I might even say I knew you were going to do this as I was creating the planet, and I chose you because you've got attributes and attitudes and a personality that he thought would be appropriate for this time and be appropriate to go forward and serve his son as his son's herald. And I think likely that's God's point of view, is that I didn't get the job by default. I got the job because I had attitudes and aptitudes and character and intellect that God wanted to use. But I want you, Israel, not to choose God because he's the only option. I want you to do what I think God did with me. Yeah, might have been in a position where there were no other options, but that doesn't mean that he didn't love this option. You're going to go into the time of trouble where there are no other options but Yahowah. But even then, choose him, because he's the best of all options. Choose him because you admire and respect who he is, what he has done, what he's said, what he's offering, what he's even asking in return from you. Embrace him because of who he is. That's the message I want to communicate to you. So during this time of trouble, it is the time that you will return to earnestly seeking, longing to learn about the relationship. And during that time, between now and the 4th of April of 2030, 3.5 years before the end, where I'll be joined by Elia, who is the master linguist when it comes to repudiating politics and religion. You think I am anti-politics and religion. I haven't killed anybody, at least that I know of, that has been religious or political. Moshe killed 850 people that we know of, and probably a lot more that followed them. But Moshe killed everyone who was overtly political and religious. Killed them with his words, and then with the Spirit of God. At this point, I have only wielded words wisely to get your attention. I have rebuked the political and the religious voices, as Yahweh would have me do. But all in all, between now and the 4th of April, this beginning of Abib in 2030, I'm all you got. Standard YAHOWAH operating procedure. Find somebody, enable that person, have that person listen, and then respond and work through them to liberate his people, save them from themselves. There are hundreds and hundreds of prophecies about what I'm doing with you right now, what I'm sharing with you, hundreds and hundreds of them. Now, it is your choice as to how you choose to respond to what I'm sharing with you about Yahowah. But then you will also choose the consequence, which is either life or death. So as you seek to learn about this relationship, at this point in time, there's only one place to go. The bookshelf at YadaYah.com, where there are 35 books awaiting your perusal, all free, all with amplified translations, easily validated, derived from the Dead Sea Scrolls, all available for your consideration, and thousands upon thousands of profoundly important insights, unheralded previously, but all to help you understand who God is and what he's offering to you, as well as what he expects from you. And that now is augmented per Yahweh's request with hundreds upon hundreds of hours of the Yahowah blog, of which this program is part. All to call you home, to call you out of Babylon, this intermixing of lies and truth, of commingling religion and politics that has confounded so many. Hosea 5:15. There for your consideration, I've just explained it to you. Can you handle it? Can you deal with it? Can you process it? Can you respond intelligently to that? Yahweh revealed very clearly that after divorcing Israel for religious infidelity, that he was going to back away and allow his beloved to do as they had chosen, which was to fend for themselves. Having previously come to their rescue, having devoted himself to guiding and teaching and protecting them, God chose not to compete with their political and religious yearnings. He left Israel to their own devices. It has not turned out well. Over the intervening millennia, the Israelites were bludgeons, as I have shared, by the Assyrians, Babylonians, Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, Roman Catholics, Mohammedans, Muslims, Ottomans, Crusaders, European Christians, conspiratorialists, Nazis, communists, Muslims, Marxists and Muslims combined. On and on it goes, and soon by the MAGAs. And we've reached the last generation. Both sides of the aisle, conservatives and progressives, all going to turn on Israel. One would have thought that after a litany of abuse, there might have been a Jew somewhere who would have thought, since our approach has resulted in centuries of demonization, maybe we should flip back through the pages of time and find something that led to a better outcome. Wouldn't that have been reasonable? Why isn't there a single Jew pointing that out to you? Why is it me that is bringing this to your attention? Had Yehudim. Yehudim's really an interesting name. I constantly want to remind you of the basis of Yehud. Yehudim is simply the plural of Yehud. Yehud is the basis of the ridiculously errant transliteration Jew. How you got from Yehud to Jew, who knows? But the truth is Yehud. Yehud is a compound of two names, name of Father and Son. It's Yahweh and Dod, Yahud, Yahweh's beloved. In his name, he is sharing with you what it is that you need to know. And it's interesting, even in Yahweh, you find the proper pronunciation of Yahweh's name also in his son's name, with it providing the proper pronunciation of the O sound. It's DWD, Dod, Yahweh. That and Haya, the verb that Yahweh conveyed, that was the basis of his name, and the Torah, the book, the teaching and guidance in which his name is presented to Israel and to the world. That Yahweh would have a name that is based upon a hand, and this is in the earliest Hebrew alphabetic script, the first phonetic alphabet in the history of the world. It's the upper arm reaching down, a forearm reaching out with an open hand. That's the first letter in Yahweh's name. In fact, even today, Yad means hand. The Yod was originally called a Yad. It is a open hand reaching down and out to you. That's the first letter in Yahweh's name. That tells you a lot about him, doesn't it? He's like a father reaching down and out with an open hand to a child, hoping that child will reach up and grasp his hand. There are two people standing up in Yahweh's name. They are the two He's. The He's are drawn as an individual standing up, reaching up, looking up to God, pointing the way to God. There are two of them. Just as there were two people in the tent of the witness in Numbers 11 that continued to convey the word of God, Eldod and Medod, God's Dode, and the one who supports Dode. Brings you right back to the fourth day of creation, when there is a greater and lesser luminary, with the greater luminary being the sun, and the lesser luminary being the moon, reflecting the sun's light, with them both serving to fulfill the moed, these restoring witnesses to the eternal testimony that play out 7 times a year, with God inviting you to be called out of this world and to join him in his. Dode is presented as the sun. He's going to return as brilliant as the sun in God's presence, according to the 89th Mizmor. And I am the moon, reflecting his light. They're metaphors, but they are instructive. Just as Yahweh's name's a metaphor. The two people standing up in his name are Dode and Yada. One right there in the heart of it all, right there next to Yahweh's hand, Yahweh's right hand. The one who is responsible for that tent peg that enlarged and secured the tent of the restoring witness, such that it could go from that to the first home for Yahweh's name. The man that lived really in the heart of God's story in year 3000 Yah. The man that's the cornerstone of the temple. The man that enabled the covenant family. He's Dode. He's the first Hay in Yahweh's name. He's the one that fulfilled the first 3 Moed Mikre. I am the last person standing up, pointing the way, not only to God, but to his beloved Son. And should you feel somehow uncomfortable with that, much like the idea of somebody telling you that they are central to God's plans and his story, why don't you find somebody else that over the last 23 years, now just 8 years prior to Yahweh's return, has written 35 books under the name Yada to know Yahweh, being the first to explain his testimony from beginning to end, making it relevant to you today, explaining everything you need to know to be part of God's family. Why don't you find somebody else that reintroduced Yahweh's name to his people? Why don't you find somebody else that recognized that Dode is not just the Messiah and the Son of God and a returning king, but he's the one who told that he would arrive in 33 CE in year 4000 Yah to fulfill Chag Matzah, and did so exactly as he said he would in the 22nd and 88th Mizmor, even the 103rd. No one has ever figured these things out before. So why don't you find somebody else that you think fulfills these promises? Find another Yahweh blog. Find someone else that meets the criterion delineated by Yeshayah as the Choder, the Adam of Parah, the man from Edom, the Bashar, the Kol, the Peh, the Edah, the Zeroah, the final one cultivating the harvest, the Bashar, herald of God, and of his son Dode. Now, had they done so, the answer was convenient enough because, well, Hezekiah was really the last time that Judah, it wasn't all Yisrael, but it was Yehudah, recognized, at least for a brief moment, what God was asking of them and offering to them. Upon rediscovering a Torah scroll, not a Talmud, He did as Yahweh had asked, and he removed all traces of religion from Yehuda and Judah. Then he and his fellow Yehudim, after removing all traces of religion, celebrated the Mikre of Chag Matzah. Chag Matzah is the most essential moment each year. It isn't a 7-day celebration of Passover. It's the 7-day celebration of Chag Matzah, the central day of it, the essential day of it, the Isim, the Chag, the celebration, the Kodesh, set apart, is Matzah. Pesach is just the first day of it. But they celebrated Chag Matzah not once, but twice. And as a result, the 185,000 Assyrian soldiers, not 4,000 to 6,000 jihadists with mostly unarmed and with garden implements on foot, who had just scurried across the border. 185,000 of the best trained and best armed soldiers in the world at that time. Poof, we're gone. You want to protect yourself from the next Alaska's flood, even if it is not 5,000 or 50,000 or 185,000 mujahideen, even if it is 5 million. Follow Hezekiah's example. God's not going to change. You need to change. The best equipped, best trained militants on the planet died without firing a shot. 50 times the number of trained soldiers compared to rampaging mujahideen who successfully invaded Israel on 10/7/23. Obviously, Yahweh is better informed, more vigilant, better equipped, and more capable than the IDF. Just saying. And in his case, there was no investment in bullets or bombs, interceptors, nor was the blood of sons and daughters spilt. And yet, as if either defiant or insane, in the wake of the most recent massacre and subsequent tsunami of anti-Semitism, most Jews have doubled down against Yahweh, becoming ever more entrenched in divisive and irrational progressive politics and parasitic and suicidal Orthodox Judaism. And as a direct result, Israel will be dismembered, sliced into pieces, to reward the Muslim savages with a terrorist state carved right out of the heart of the promised land. Thereupon, 10/7/23 is going to be played out again with 100 times and maybe even 1,000 the bombardments and belligerence, and with catastrophic results. Jews will endure a decade of the worst treatment any race has ever received in the long annals of human atrocities, from 10/7/23 to 10/7/33. Suffering through horrors worse than the European Holocaust in the shadow of the Holy Roman Empire and its church. And while the nation will be devastated, a remnant will be spared not once, but 3 times over the ensuing decade between 10/7/23 and 10/7/33. There will be a substantial harvest of prominent and mature grain on Shabuah, which is why we're doing this program today, so that you know about it. You have 1 year to prepare yourself for it. Transpiring on a Shabbat, May 22nd, at sunset in 2026, as the time of Jacob's troubles commences in earnest. Those receiving the trip to Shamaim will include the covenant family comprised of observant Yehudim and Goyim, also represented by the two loaves lifted up before God during the feast, and by the realization that those being harvested are represented by chitaim, wheats in the plural, as God's pronouncement of all that can join him on this day based upon their response to what he is offering and expects in return, and their support of his people. The subsequent harvest will be comprised of olives and Israelites, therefore. And this reaping will transpire on Towrah following a solar eclipse on the Shabat beginning September 23rd, 2033. I shouldn't say following a solar eclipse. The solar eclipse is going to occur during the Shabat of September 24th, 2033. The last ingathering is on the 23rd, a Friday evening. But as the sun rises on the Shabbat of the 24th of September 2033, there will not only be a solar eclipse, because this is the one moment that the brilliance of the sun is overshadowed, if you will, by the work of the moon. And the corporeal manifestation of Hasatan, just like the beast of Rome, took the Bashar body, the life of the Bashar body of Dod as the Passover lamb. So this corporeal manifestation of Hasatan will take the life out of my corporeal body, my Bashar, as the Bashar herald at that moment. And it's what Eliah, Yahweh's God, the prophet, and Yahweh do as a result of this sacrifice that will transform the mortal remnant of Israel. 10 days before the Messiah and Son of God, Dod, return on Yom Kippurim, 6:22 p.m. as the sun sets in Jerusalem with the arrival of the sun. In the Yobel year of 6,000 Yah, October 2nd, 2033. 5 days thereafter, during a lunar eclipse, Sukkah will be celebrated as the covenant family camps out with father and son in conditions similar to those experienced during Gan Eden. So there is an open invitation for some very special people to join the firstborn children of the covenant family. But there will be no sanction for any religious sect, for any political institution or nation. And now that the options, timing, criterion, and consequences have been presented, I want Israelites and Yehudim to appreciate the implications. As was foretold by Gabriel, who is Dod. Gabriel is not an angel. Gabriel is God's most competent and courageous man. That's what Gabriel means. Dod visited with Daniel in Babylon to explain the future and what was going to transpire. He was joined by Michael. And at the time I thought, well, having Gabriel, who is Dod, joined by Michael, who is Yada, back in a meeting 2,600 years ago, that's pretty weird stuff, man. I understand that God manages time different than we do, and that he can do as he wishes in time. But that was still pretty weird, but not nearly as weird, I guess, as seeing Dod and myself in the tent of the restoring witnesses, Yahweh's answer to Moshe's meltdown back in 1447 BCE during the Exodus. So we do have the realization that Michael, also a man myself, with Gabriel, Dod, had a lot to say and explain to Daniel, which means God is judgmental. And much of what we learn is also communicated from Yahweh to Israel through the last of the prophets, Malachi in 447 BCE. It means my messenger. Other than what the Father did to support his Son during the fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. In the Yobel year 4000 Yan 33 CE, God has remained in Shamaim, the spiritual realm, and he has left the Israelites to wallow in their religious and political disorders, their overall bitterness and defiance. Another 2,449 years would pass before God would engage again. And again, he would reach out through a single individual, as has been his custom. It is his standard operating procedure. In this case, it was on Towrah because he is the herald of Towrah. It was in 2001, 32 years prior to the time that he would lay down his life as the Adamah Parah and fulfill Towrah in 2033. This time, God's outreach was through a goy, just as he had foretold in the Torah and throughout the Navi, introducing this observant foreigner, the Nakri, during the Sermon on the Mount, as Solomon presented him to Israel as the house for Yahweh's name was commissioned and dedicated. Yahweh remains committed to calling his people home through the words of the prophets while exposing the impediments which now clutter the way, and he has found the witness to do so. The resulting 25-year mission has already left a legacy of 35 books, and soon there will be at least one more beyond that, a 36th, as we reprise in the company, because it tells a great deal about how we got to this place. And the fourth volume of Coming Home will be published as well, called Bashar Herald. All available at YADAYAH.com, which is currently in the process of being transformed into a much more user-friendly and engaging experience, along with the many hundreds of programs that are now part of this Yahowah blog on Facebook, on X, on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey. So as promised, Yahweh has re-engaged, doing so the moment he found someone ad ashar shamar, willing to closely examine and carefully consider the way to receive the benefits of the relationship and becoming the restoring witness to the eternal testimony. As a result of this, Israelites have once again bakash paneh, sought Yahweh's presence responsibly, investigating and learning about God's reappearance. Yehudim around the world are doing so, as are Goyim. It is all played out exactly as God foretold. This time through Hosea 27 centuries ago. While many will continue to respond over the next year between now and the Shabuah harvest of standing grain in May 2026, there will be, as I have shared, 2 additional opportunities for those who miss the ultimate expression of Yahweh's love. Although to capitalize on those 2, you're going to have to survive the time of Yaakov's troubles. With death stalking Jews everywhere on earth, the risks are far too high to wait, although we'll be there for you, should you choose to do so. This next end gathering of Bekurim firstborn children will be YAHOWAH during the time of trouble, as Israel is narrowed and Jews are besieged. The souls gathered and withdrawn, Shakar, will approach by earnestly seeking God, longing to learn about the relationship. And that is music to my ears because, as I've said, well, I recognize that I was the only option available to Yahweh to perform this message as the final witness. That does not mean that Yahweh chose me by default. He well could have surveyed the souls that were available to him and made a choice, as he did with Dode, to choose me over others. I hope that is the case. I expect that is the case. I want you to do the same. And this says that just because Yahweh is the only option that is viable left to you, Yisrael and Yehudim, this says that you're going to do a thorough investigation. You're going to become observant again, and you're going to respond to all that God is offering. And that's what he wants. That's what I want. That's what you should do. Now, those who respond to the invitation to attend this Shabuah harvest in May 2026, an eternity with Yahweh in the Bereth covenant family awaits. And thereafter, aside from the final Yehudim, who will be among those in the dwindling remnant who return to Yahweh 7 years later during Towrah, just 10 days prior to Kippurim in October of 2020 or 2033, there will be no other opportunity. All remaining souls will either be extinguished or incarcerated. It's the last hurrah. So today we find that Yehudim are emerging from their nightmarish past, opening their eyes, walking away from religion and from politics and becoming observant. And for this reason, Yada Yahowah was prepared and published. It is the reason that we are doing the YAHOWAH blog. It's the reason that we have engaged on social media. And for this reason, Yada Yahowah was prepared, it was published, and it is also telling that the comprehensive rewrites of Goddamn Religion and Twistianity, the completion of the Coming Home volumes with 3 and 4, and the final edits of the Yada Yahowah books, these volumes, was completed as the sun sets in Jerusalem on the Shabat of May 22nd, 2026 is when it's all going to come to the final curtain call. The entire cast of every book, of every episode of the YAHOWAH blog, of everything that we have written and spoken on behalf of Yahweh will be debuted. Finished, appropriate, correct, and available for you. There is just barely enough time remaining to prepare the final ingredients in Yahweh's Nesh sign that God's going to be uplifting to garner his people's attention and to call them home. So I thank you. We've gone over the hour time. I wanted to do a special episode of Qatsyr Harvest in the recognition of Shabuah, which is celebrated tomorrow. And so I thank you for tuning in and listening to all God wants his people to know in advance of the Shabuah Qatsyr. Thank you for listening.